What if I told you there's a fast food chain in America that shuts every single one of its restaurants one full day a week, throwing away an estimated $1 billion a year in sales? And it still makes more money per store than McDonald's. But here's something even crazier. No matter how rich you are, you cannot buy a single share of this company. So who's actually behind it? Let's get into the full story of a $20 billion Chick-fil-A empire that Wall Street can't touch. Chapter 1. The company that closes on its busiest day and still wins. Let me make sure that first part really lands, because it's genuinely one of the wildest moves in business history. Sunday is, for most restaurants, one of the biggest money-making days of the entire week. Families pouring out after church, lazy afternoon crowds, the whole thing. And Chick-fil-A just closes. Every location, every Sunday. Has done since the very beginning. Analysts estimate this little habit costs them somewhere around $1 billion in sales they simply choose not to make every single year. Picture walking up to a pile of $1 billion and going, "Nah, we're good." That's what this company does 52 times a year, on purpose. And here's the part that breaks your brain. It doesn't hurt them even a little. Because despite being closed on the one day everyone else cashes in, Chick-fil-A pulls in an average of around $9.3 million per restaurant per year. The highest of any fast food chain in the entire United States. Higher than McDonald's. To put that in perspective, a single Chick-fil-A location quietly out-earns 3 or 4 typical McDonald's locations combined. And they do it while being open 6 days instead of 7, and with fewer than a quarter of the locations McDonald's has. So McDonald's needs way more stores, open way more often, just to compete. Chick-fil-A does it part-time, basically. You've seen the proof with your own eyes. Those drive-through lines wrapped around the building, 2 lanes deep, employees out in the parking lot taking orders on tablets because the line's too long to fit. People will sit in a Chick-fil-A line that's 30 cars deep and drive past an empty competitor to do it. So how does a company win the race while running fewer laps than everyone else? And how did a family turn one fried chicken sandwich into a $20 billion fortune that Wall Street can't get its hands on? To get that, we have to go back to a kid from small-town Georgia who grew up dead broke during the Great Depression. Chapter 2. From a dwarf-sized diner to a chicken revolution. The whole empire starts with a man named Truett Cathy, born in 1921 in a tiny town in Georgia, and growing up he had basically nothing. This was the Great Depression, and money was painfully tight. His dad bounced between work as a farmer and an insurance salesman, and his mom ran a boarding house just to keep food on the table, which meant young Truett grew up cooking meals and waiting on the boarders his mom took in. And that's actually the origin of everything, because right there, as a kid, he learned 2 things in his bones: how to work brutally hard and how to make a customer feel genuinely taken care of. Hold on to that, because that second thing becomes a billion-dollar superpower later. After serving in the Army in World War II, Truett teamed up with his brother Ben, and in 1946 they opened a tiny little diner near a Ford plant in Hapeville, Georgia. They called it, and I love this, the Dwarf Grill, because the place was so small. Later renamed the Dwarf House. Now here's the moment the whole thing pivots. For years, Truett ran that little diner, but in 1964 he started messing around with a new idea. He got his hands on a pressure fryer, a machine that could cook a chicken fillet in about the same time it took to fry a burger. And he paired it with a secret blend of seasonings. The result was a boneless chicken breast, served simple, with a couple of pickles, on a buttered bun. That's it. That's the sandwich. Now, contrary to what a lot of people think, Truett didn't invent the chicken sandwich, but his version hit different, and people went nuts for it. And rather than rushing to open 100 restaurants, he did something clever and patient. He started licensing the sandwich out to other diners first, building a buzz and a name before he ever opened his own place. That name, by the way, was Chick-fil-A. The filet, a little play on a fillet of chicken. And in 1967, he finally opened the first real one in an Atlanta shopping mall, betting that all that foot traffic would do the selling for him. He was right. But the rules he built that company on were about to make him very rich and very controversial. Speaking of the patient, unconventional move that quietly pays off big, that's what pulled someone on our team to the Pulse R8 smart ring. It tracks your heart rate, your sleep, and your workouts straight from your finger. A week on a single charge, 100 days with the case, and it's fully waterproof. The part that got us was the price. Under $40, a fraction of what the big-name rings cost, because it comes direct instead of through the retailers that mark everything up. If you're watching on your TV, pause and scan the QR code on screen with your phone camera, or tap the first link in the description. Because the strange rules he built that company on are exactly what made him a fortune. Chapter 3. The Weird Rules That Built a Fortune. From day one, Truett Cathy ran his company by a set of rules that, on paper, sound like a great way to go bankrupt. Instead, they became the secret recipe. Rule 1. Treat every customer like a guest in your own home. This sounds like a corny poster in a break room, but Truett meant it literally, and he built the entire culture around it. It's where the famous "my pleasure" comes from. Say "thank you" to a Chick-fil-A employee, and you won't get a mumbled "no problem." You'll get a crisp "my pleasure," like you're at a fancy hotel instead of a fast food counter. That obsessive, almost old-fashioned hospitality is the thing that built those monster lines. People aren't just buying a sandwich, they're buying the feeling of being treated well, which is shockingly rare in fast food. Rule 2. Keep the menu tight. While competitors crammed their menus with 50 things they did just okay, Chick-fil-A did chicken and did it nearly perfectly. Focus over flooding. And Rule 3 is the famous one. Closed on Sundays, no exceptions, baked in from the Dwarf House days. This came straight from Truett's deep religious faith. He wanted his people and himself to have a guaranteed day for rest and worship. And in the early days, this was a genuine obstacle. He had to convince shopping malls to give a prime spot to a restaurant that would sit dark and empty one day a week, which mall operators hated. People thought he was nuts to leave that money on the table. But he refused to bend, and over time, that stubborn decision became one of the most recognizable brand traits in America. A company that visibly puts its values ahead of a quick buck. The 80s brought the chicken nuggets and the waffle fries. The 90s brought those hilarious cows begging you to eat more chicken. And the brand exploded from a regional thing into a national obsession. But underneath the cute cows was a money machine built on a structure almost nobody understands. And it's the real reason Wall Street can't touch them. Chapter 4. The $10,000 golden ticket with a brutal catch. Okay. This is the part that genuinely sets Chick-fil-A apart from every other fast food name you know, and it's wild that more people don't talk about it. Think about how you normally open a McDonald's or a Subway. You need serious money, often well over $1 million of your own cash, to buy in. And once you do, you can own a bunch of locations and build your own little franchise empire. Chick-fil-A flipped that entire model on its head. To become a Chick-fil-A operator, you put in just $10,000. 10 grand. The company covers all the rest of the massive startup cost. The building, the equipment, everything. So in theory, a regular person without a fortune can run a restaurant pulling in $9 million a year. Sounds like the greatest deal in business, right? Here's the catch, and it's a big one. That ridiculously low price comes with ridiculously tight control. You almost never get to own a second location. One operator. One restaurant. That's the rule. You can't build a chain of them. You can't pass your restaurant down to your kids like a family heirloom. And the company keeps roughly half the profits of every single restaurant. And that is the genius of it, and the answer to the title of this video. Because Chick-fil-A keeps that 50% cut of thousands of high-performing restaurants, and because the whole thing is privately held by the Cathy family, all of that money flows straight up to them, and stays there. And they're famously brutal about who even gets in. They reportedly accept well under 1% of operator applicants, a tougher acceptance rate than the most elite universities in the country, all to protect that consistency. There are no outside shareholders. There's no stock you can buy on the New York Stock Exchange. There's no ticker symbol. The company doesn't even have to file its financials publicly the way every public company does, because legally, it doesn't have to answer to anybody but the family. So when people say Wall Street can't touch them, it's not a figure of speech. It is literally, structurally impossible for an outside investor to buy a piece of this empire. The Cathys own it all, and they intend to keep it that way forever. And keeping that kind of control means the money piles up in one family in a way that's almost hard to comprehend. Chapter 5. How rich are we actually talking? So let's actually put numbers on this thing because they're genuinely staggering for a company that sells chicken. Today, Chick-fil-A does over $22 billion in sales across the system every year. Let that sink in. They're now the third biggest restaurant chain in the entire United States by sales, behind only McDonald's and Starbucks. They beat out basically everyone else you can think of. And remember, they're doing this while closed on Sundays, with way fewer stores than the giants. As for the family fortune itself, the numbers depend on who's counting, but Forbes has pegged the Cathy family's combined wealth in the tens of billions, with the three sibling heirs each sitting on something north of $13 billion individually, which lands the family comfortably among the richest in all of America. Whether you call it 20 billion or more, this is dynasty-level, generational money, all built on a sandwich. And here's a detail I find genuinely charming, because it tells you how this family thinks. The CEO chair has only changed hands 3 times in nearly 60 years. Founder Truett ran it. Then his son Dan Cathy took over as CEO in 2013. And during his 8 years in charge, the chain's sales rocketed from about $5 billion to over $16 billion. Then in 2021, the torch passed to Andrew Cathy, Truett's grandson, keeping it firmly in the family for a third generation. They're not bringing in some hired-gun outsider CEO to juice the stock price for a few years because, again, there is no stock price. They can think in decades, not quarters. They can make slow, patient, values-driven decisions that would get a normal public CEO fired, because there's no Wall Street breathing down their necks demanding growth every 90 days. But all that money and all those values have also dragged this family into some serious fights. And we have to talk about those honestly. Chapter 6. When the Values Started a War. Here's the thing about building a brand loudly based on your personal beliefs. Eventually, those beliefs are going to collide with a whole lot of other people's, and for Chick-fil-A, that collision was massive. The big one hit in 2012. Dan Cathy, then a top executive and soon-to-be CEO, publicly stated his opposition to same-sex marriage, citing his religious convictions. And it didn't stop at words. Tax records showed that the family's charitable foundation and related Cathy-linked giving had funneled millions of dollars to organizations that opposed same-sex marriage. When that came to light, the reaction was an absolute firestorm. LGBTQ advocacy groups and their allies called for boycotts and accused the company of bankrolling discrimination. It got intensely political. Some city officials and college campuses publicly tried to block new Chick-fil-A locations from opening at all. On the flip side, conservative supporters rallied hard, turning out in droves for a Chick-fil-A Appreciation Day that had lines out the door. The chicken sandwich had somehow become a front line in America's culture war. The company has tried to navigate it in the years since. In 2019, Chick-fil-A announced it was shifting its charitable giving to focus on education, homelessness, and hunger, a move widely read as an attempt to step out of the controversy. But, and this is the honest part, they pointedly did not promise to stop all donations to faith-based groups, so critics stayed skeptical, and reports in later years suggested money was still flowing towards some contested causes. And it followed them overseas. When they expanded into Canada and the UK, protesters showed up there too. It's the genuine double-edged sword of this whole empire. The exact same unbending commitment to "we do things our way, values first" that built those incredible customer service lines is also what lit the boycotts. Both things are true at once. And it's not the only criticism. Like a lot of fast food chains, they've faced complaints about low wages and tough working conditions too. This is not a perfectly clean story, but it does lead to a genuinely fascinating question about why the controversy never actually killed them. Chapter 7. Why the boycotts never worked. You'd think years of boycott campaigns and culture war headlines would put a serious dent in a company. With Chick-fil-A, the opposite kept happening. They just kept growing. And the reason why is actually the most important business lesson in this whole story. It comes back to that fortress structure from earlier. A normal public company facing a massive boycott has a problem. Nervous shareholders. The stock dips, investors panic, the board demands the CEO fix it, and suddenly the company is apologizing and reversing course to calm Wall Street down. Chick-fil-A has none of those pressure points. No public stock to crater. No outside shareholders to spook. No analysts demanding they cave. So when the boycotts came, the Cathy family could simply absorb it and keep doing exactly what they wanted. Their privacy didn't just protect their money, it protected their ability to not flinch. Meanwhile, every Appreciation Day counter-rally actually pumped more sales through the doors. For a huge chunk of their customer base, the company's willingness to stick to its guns made them more loyal, not less. And underneath all the noise, the fundamentals never stopped working. The food was still craveable, the service was still genuinely better than the competition, and the lines never got shorter. Turns out, if your actual product is excellent enough, an enormous number of people will keep showing up regardless of the headlines. They've been named America's favorite fast food restaurant by a major customer satisfaction index 8 years running, while all this controversy swirled. That's the wild paradox of Chick-fil-A. The values created the enemies, and the values created the superfans, and the private structure let them ride out the war without ever changing course. Which sets up the one big question left. What happens to an empire like this next? Chapter 8. The fortress goes global. So where does a $20 billion chicken dynasty that already dominates America go from here? The answer is everywhere else. For decades, Chick-fil-A was almost weirdly cautious about expanding beyond US borders, dipping just a toe into Canada and Puerto Rico. An early attempt in South Africa back in the 90s actually flopped. Not because people didn't like the food, but simply because nobody over there knew the brand yet. But that careful era is ending. The company has now planted its flag overseas in a real way, opening its first restaurants in the United Kingdom and Singapore, with an openly stated goal of being in 5 international markets by 2030, eyeing Europe and Asia. They're betting that the same formula, incredible service, a tight menu, that my pleasure magic, can win over customers who've never sat in one of those legendary drive-through lines. And they're funding the whole global push with their own private billions, on their own timeline, answering to no one. And that's the real takeaway of the Cathy family's story. The thing that makes them genuinely different from almost every empire we cover. They built one of the most valuable private companies in America by doing nearly everything the experts said was impossible. They close on the busiest day of the week and out-earn the competition per store. They let operators in for $10,000 and keep half the profits flowing straight to the family. They've taken hits in the culture wars that would have forced a public company to fold, and they didn't budge an inch because no shareholder could make them. Every single one of those choices only works because they refuse to sell a piece of themselves to Wall Street. The locked door isn't a side detail of this story. It's the whole reason the empire exists exactly the way it does. From a tiny diner in Georgia to a global chicken fortress that nobody on the outside will ever own a sliver of. Truett Cathy bet that you could get insanely rich without compromising, and 3 generations later, his family is still proving him right. One Sunday, closed, line-out-the-door restaurant at a time. If stories about the families and empires that built their fortunes by breaking all the rules are what brought you here, subscribe to Global Status, and we'll keep delivering them. See you in the next one.